Good afternoon, everyone. On the revised timing for UK folks, hope everyone is doing okay and ready for another session. It's just an icebreaker activity. Let me know what you celebrated. Did you celebrate Diwali or did you celebrated Halloween? Because this time they were both combined, and people were doing all type of crazy stuff combining both festivals. So let me know in the chat what you celebrated. Was it a Diwali you celebrated or Halloween, or was it what was something else? Maybe not sure if there was any other uh, festival there. So hopefully. Hello, Jay. Thank you for being here. And I let Prasad while you answer. So Prasad is here, and we have Sharik today with us. So hopefully we would have lot of interest and lot of things coming up. Sharik would help me today with the technical track, and then it would be on the Prasad that who would take care of the star format of interview. I'm getting some information here, both Diwali, that's good one, Prashant, and then celebrated Diwali, but my kids were more interested in Halloween. Yeah, I agree on that. That is how everyone gets dressed up, and some things people are very creative when they try to scare others, so it's a very creative thing. But yeah, how was your experience, Sharik, Prasad, for Diwali and all?
Yeah, so that was me, Diwali
Okay.
and Halloween thing. So my kids, Halloween, in London, they put all these different kind of fairs and marches, multiple things. So they were more interested in those costumes and tricks and treat, those kind of stuff. So yeah, it was
Great,
fun.
great.
It was good weekend.
Nice.
So for me, Diwali is about obviously, doing some lighting and all at home, and mostly sweets. I love sweets, so it's a time when I forget about all the calories and I hog.
Yeah.
You know, Ashish, bhai, when Prasad started, I thought the moment he said this line, Diwali is more for me. So I thought he was about to say it's more for me for the preparation of the reinvent.
Yeah, he's busy with
No,
reinventing. I agree on that. Great.
So
Good. So hopefully everyone is enjoying the festival season, but learning is important. So keep learning while you are on having fun. It's good to keep on engaging with some of the learning activities also, and that's why we are here. And we will discuss today about building and training a machine learning model. So it would be a discussion between me and Sharik, and then Prasad would help us with the component related to star format interview. Jane, good to have you here, Jane. Thank you so much. So Jane Looper is joining. She heads the uh, AWS Cloud Clubs, and she manages things in all over the world about students who want to enrich on cloud, the college-going student. And she has been very supportive for BESA's program. So thank you, Jane, for being here. So you're preparing for SA certification, parallelly preparing for AI Foundational, Ramkrishna. So stay tuned. I have just finished recording one of my courses, so probably I would be releasing it soon. And obviously, being BESA member, you would have a very differentiated pricing for that. So let me start today and talk about how to build and train machine learning model. So Sharik is the customer, and let's see how we can help him in understanding why he may have to build his model and what could be the process to get started. And we will keep this focused discussion based on people who are not having too much of the programming background or they do not have a lot of machine learning experience, how they can still get started and build their own platform. So that's what we would be focusing on. So Sharik, welcome.
thank you, Ashish. And yes, so last few sessions, you discussed with my colleague Parna, and you gave us very good insight about what exactly machine learning is, what is AI, and we have a very good understanding now already within the organization, within the team, that what exactly these technologies are. Some of the buzzwords when we heard before, we were not able to understand those, but now we have much better clarity. So thank you for that first thing. And yes, I think now we are at a situation where we understand things. We know what is machine learning. We know that it can be beneficial for us and for the developers and everybody. But of course, we have a set of people, right? So we have existing set of developers. We have people who handle our cloud environment, and we have project managers. So the question would be, of course, like on AWS in particular and in general, when we want to get started, we have applications, we have existing apps
Mhm.
already. We have a lot of data in our organization. So we want to collate these two things and in such a way that we utilize and leverage the data to make our application better, and in the process make use of take advantage of all these new emerging technologies. So what would you recommend us to get started with?
Yes, so it's a good thing. Like, so what I call in my session that data is the differentiator, right?
Okay.
Everyone has access to the same type of silicon, same types of algorithms, same type of hardware and software. But
Mhm.
what differentiate your organization would be the data. Let's say if I'm talking about organization like Amazon, they have accumulated so much data, or organizations like Wikipedia. So that makes their product or their recommendation or their machine learning model different. And we will be focusing on those things also. And as you rightly mentioned, Sharik, that it's not expected that everyone would know about programming, or they would know how statistics work, or how mathematical formula work. So idea of these product which we are going to discuss is to give machine learning to everyone. We
Yeah.
saw one method where generative AI models are there, what we call foundation model, and anyone can just go ask a question in natural language and they would get answer. And I also always say that now in coming days, English will become the most prominent programming language, right? Because we are seeing that you just write a program, or you just say I need this and a program is generated. So probably
Correct.
people would be writing more prompt rather than program, and this is how the machine learning is unfolding. Let's take
Right.
a step further. So
Mhm.
generic things you could do with foundation model, but there will be cases where you want a very specific outcome. Or
Mhm.
maybe you already have a foundation model, but you want to fine tune it or adjust it purely based on your data set or purely based on your organization. So that's what we can be discussing now. So let me give you a brief idea first, and then
Mhm.
I'll go you into console, and then I'll show you a demo that how easy it is to get started. Let's talk about building and training a machine learning model. Now, when we think about model, people think not sure what it is. It is something coming out of space. Is it something which is very big in size, or something which require a lot of compute power? So yes, it could be, but on a nutshell, it is basically a set of file which is making up a model. It is in a way is a software. So we would be building that software by using some of the tools which are available without writing any single line of code, and without knowing about all the complicated mathematics associated with. So machine learning has become mature, and we can start building and training our model much easier. So let me give you some idea on that.
That's a
Go ahead,
very
Shri.
important point. Just wanted to, I mean, thank you again, because last week you had this section where you discussed with Parna about not everybody needs to know mathematics, and you have these five,
Exactly.
six different roles or profiles in machine learning. This was a very important, because one of the road blockers, a lot of us think that, oh, I have to know mathematics, I have to know
Mm.
statistics and probability. Yes, knowing that is good, but that's not the kind of end of the world. It's not that if you don't know, you can't start with machine learning or AI and ML. That's not the case. So yeah, thank you for that as well.
Great. So yeah, means see, ML is for everyone. It's not like it has to be proprietary for individual persons, right?
Very.
Like I would give an example. Let's say what Windows did to the PC world, personal computer world, is
Oh yeah.
what AWS is doing to machine learning world. They
True.
made these models available to everyone. Like before, operating a computer was complicated. Why? Because you have to remember commands for that. Then
Right.
Windows came in, people were able to navigate to the mouse. Just with basic training, they could get started. That made it so easy. And same thing is happening here. SageMaker is the service who helps you in getting started much faster, and it gives you tools for every stage of machine learning. So four phases: prepare, build, train, and deploy. And we would see some of the tools which are there, and we will see demo of one of them. So let's get started on that, and keep your questions coming and suggestions so that we could improve on. And any questions people are in audience, feel free to put them into chat. We would be happy to answer as much as we can. Now, this is the SageMaker ecosystem or features and component of SageMaker. Again, it is not an exhaustive list. It is just the very basic information which is good to get started. So if you can see, there are some products which aligns to end-to-end machine learning like SageMaker Canvas, Amazon SageMaker Studio, and then we have specific product which are into a specific domain, like we want to do data collection, or want to do evaluation of the model, or we want to train our model. So that is where all these components fit in. What I'll show you, Sharik, today is about Amazon SageMaker Canvas. Canvas, as the name says, it gives you a canvas, and on top of it, you should be able to build your own environment, and you should be able to set up whatever you require. Shouldn't be an issue at all on that. And everything will be done from a console. You do not need to know a lot of complicated machine learning or a lot of programming. You just need a web browser, you need access to your data set, and you should be good to get started. So that is what we will see today. We'll talk about Amazon SageMaker Canvas as a service. And then if you see SageMaker Studio, This is for people who are a little bit more on the programming side. They need to write the code. They want to create a program. They want to use Python or C++ or Java or any type of different codes. They may probably be using SageMaker Studio. So SageMaker Studio is more towards the programming side, whereas Canvas is more toward the UI side where you can start building your resources. Does it make sense?
Just one quick question on that. So does that mean that, I mean, I'm assuming that in that case, SageMaker Studio would be used by more by people like data scientists, people who are like kind of creating those ML models, and Canvas would be used the subsequent, like people who are creating those models, productionizing the ML workloads, people who are like using those existing models, which is created by a separate team, and then putting that into production, or kind of, what do you call, integrating that with the existing application. Is that the right assumption there?
I wouldn't say that you would use only these tools for a specific thing. So they are end-to-end tool, right?
Okay.
So you would use Canvas if you do not want to get involved into programming. Let's say I'm a business analyst. I don't know a lot of things related to machine learning, or I
Okay.
am just a business user. I want to know, hey, what would be my sales next year based on the model or data we have, right?
Mhm.
So that is where, when I do not need to do a lot of customization, I would probably use Canvas. But if I have a lot of customization, maybe I'm migrating from on-prem to cloud now. I already have my program for data filtering, for data association, or for data mapping. Probably I would be best using Studio in that case. So Studio is more interactive in the sense you write a code, get the output, keep moving forward. Whereas Canvas says, okay, I am more driven from UI. I want to see the pipeline. Okay, data is coming from point A to point B. I applied a transformation, then it is going to C, and then it is the output being generated. So that is where Canvas would be a little more useful to you.
Okay, one more question. Would that be the case in that case that Studio and Canvas, they have these complementary features, and a team typically would use both of them in different situations? Or are they like, okay, I can use this or I can use this? I mean, for example, I have this ECS versus EKS, right? Typically, company or an organization would use either ECS or EKS, but typically not both. Is that
Yeah, I agree
is
on
that
that.
the model? Which one is it in this case?
No, it's a good thing. Like, this is all complementary to each other. So what do you
Okay.
think? Let's say you feel that data preparation, which I have to do, is very is simple task. It is not very complicated data preparation. So that time I could go ahead and perform that data preparation task maybe into SageMaker Canvas, right? And then I could go ahead and go through the whole model step. I would get a recipe, I would get a code, and that code I can then leverage into Studio if I need to. So they both are complementing each other. Now, let's say I want to use a model registry, I could use in Canvas also. I could have used it into SageMaker Studio also. Same way, automatic model tuning, I could have used in both places. I want to monitor the model I created, so I could have used it in both places. So they are complementary. They are not either or choice at all.
Okay. And the steps which is mentioned below, for example, data collection, data analysis, I think that's what you mentioned as well, right? So I can do a data collection in, for example, Canvas, and then use training model in Studio, or vice versa. Those kind of things can be done.
It's little different. Let me explain that into little more detail what we mean here. So let's say you wanted to use SageMaker Canvas. Now, one way of getting data is that you use AWS Glue, or you use some Kinesis stream, and that data you can bring in. Or you could say, I have my data available and I would bring it into Data Wrangler, and from Wrangler, I would be using it into Canvas. So Canvas interface gives you option to use Data Wrangler, which is built into it, and through that you could use it. So either I use Data Wrangler independently and just perform all the analysis there and then bring it to other processes, or I could go to Canvas, and within Canvas I could invoke Data Wrangler, and from that I could perform my data analysis.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right.
So I'll show you a demo, Sadiq, so that would be much easier for you to follow. What I'm doing here, I am taking a publicly available demo so that anyone wants to do the things on their own, they should be able to do it. So that I am using is a SageMaker Immersion Day. So SageMaker Immersion Day is a really nice way to get started with SageMaker. I will give you the link in the email, don't worry, or I could paste it here also. So here is the analysis which we are going to do. So this is SageMaker Canvas Immersion Day, and let me put the link into the chat in case somebody wants to explore it. Give me a minute, and through this you should be able to get started. Now, once I'm here, I could go ahead with setting up some prerequisites. So you could do this while you have your own account, or maybe if you are attending a AWS workshop, you could have done there. I would just pick up one section of that, which is beginner's lab, which is end-to-end machine learning. So what we'll do in this case, we would get our data, get that data, understand what data is, understand and identify the important features from the data set, and then use it to build a model. Once the model is built, we would train it, and then we would go ahead and deploy it. So that is the flow we would be following while we move forward. Now, the data set which has been given to you here is data coming from a bank. So the data sets are there. These are public data sets, so you could also go ahead and download it, should not be issue. So this is a certificate of deposit. This is the lab. So we are trying to understand here that we have data set of a bank customers, and some bank customer have bought a product X. What are the probability of those customer buying another product Y also from me? So that's what we want to predict. Or what could be the retention of those customers? So you think about whatever scenario, but we can just use this data set to build a model and predict that what would be probability of that customer buying a product again, or maybe being retained for a long time, or would they customer would be churning out and would be leaving the bank. So that type of analysis we want to do. So this is a simple data set. Let me download it here, and we will then get started on that. So I'm downloading this data set, which is just a CSV file, and through that CSV, we should be able to perform all the things which we need. So here I am on to download section, and I would use this bank marketing.csv file. Now, to utilize this data set, I have to open Amazon SageMaker. So I am going into my console, and there I would be opening up SageMaker canvas, and we'll get started. If you are doing this in your own account, Sharik, be aware this can be attracting some charges. So be aware about the money you would be spending on that. It may not be running completely on free tier. So just be aware about some of the charges which you may have to end up paying for that.
So I think I need to tell
It should
my
not be huge.
engineers that when you done with the data, done with everything, make sure you delete everything, right? So one of the best practices. Yep.
Agree on that. Let me see why this is still opening up.
I think just kind of while this is loading up, so one of the places where we can get more data if we want, I think Kaggle could be a good option, right? That has got
There
tons
are
of
a lot of open data sets available. AWS has our own data sets available, so you could have leveraged that too. Shouldn't be a problem. So a lot of open source data sets are available from which you should be able to download any of the data set and get started. Okay. So hopefully everyone is following along, and I am now going ahead and using SageMaker as a service. Now, when you first time open SageMaker, you may have to set up something called a SageMaker domain, which is a logical boundary for your SageMaker resources, and you may have to set up a SageMaker user through which you should be able to then perform all the operations. So here I am into SageMaker console, and if you look here on the left side, you see these things which is called SageMaker canvas. So I have already set up a domain. It is all click next kind of a thing. And now I am going into SageMaker canvas here. This is the product I am going to use, or feature I am going to use. I'm logging into that using a default user profile, and I say, hey, open the canvas for me. So behind the scene, what is happening? There is a EC2 machine on which this Canvas software is installed, and I am getting access to that Canvas software. And it's not like I'm putting my data so it is going to a AWS pool or everyone can see it. It still remains within my own environment. So I'm not spilling my beans or sharing my data to others. It stays within my own environment. It is completely private. So this is what Canvas would look like. If you look here, this is being represented by some random number. Studio US East to SageMaker Canvas default home. So this is what the interface looks like. Pretty easy to get started, purely wizard driven, which you could follow along and get started. Now, the data we have, Sharik, is a CSV file. I don't know what is inside it as of now, let's assume. So what we can do, we could get started with Data Wrangler here. So see this, I am in Canvas, but now I am going to a product which is called my Data Wrangler. Or even before that, I could bring that data which I have as my data set. So let me bring that data. And here I am saying, hey, I want to import my data. And this is going to be an image, or it could be a document, or it could be a tabular format. Parquet is also supported, which is very commonly used. So we could have utilized these things. Siddesh, you are asking a question we just answered, so probably you revisit the video. I answered the question about what is Canvas and what is Studio. We discussed those things. So, right. So I am here, and now I am going to give it, let's say, BESA bank data set. It is the name I am giving it. So now I would have option that from where I want to bring this data. So I could have performed a local upload, or if you could see, we have integration with all these sources. So you do not need to write any code at all. If your data is in MariaDB, it is in document. If it is into some other services, S3, Snowflake, Redshift, you could directly bring it. Should not be issue at all.
I
So
see a lot of third-party major,
exactly.
yes, there's Snowflake, Databricks. So yeah, that's good to see. Good to see. And I see one comment from two comments, in fact, from Asna. That's a good information. Thank you for that, Asna. That you do have this trial period for SageMaker. So first 2 months you get it free, and there are certain types of instances which you can
Types of
utilize.
instances you could
That
leverage.
you don't incur any charges. So yeah, thank you for that information, Asna.
Thank you, Asna. So here I am, and I say I want to have a local data set. I want to select a file from my computer, which we just downloaded. Very simple one. And once this data comes in, SageMaker would give me option to perform analysis on that so that I could see how things are looking like and whether it is a good data set for me to get started or not. So I'm into download section, and this is my bank marketing.csv. I selected it. This is one file, not a very huge file. It has some records, and once it is there, I should be able to perform a preview also, and I should be able to see some detail about the data in a minute. So let it be there, and we will get started. Now, as I said before also, that the prediction of your machine learning model would depend on the type of data you have. So data cleaning, data preparation is a very important task, and you should be doing or paying a lot of attention in that case, because if you like garbage in, garbage out, right? So if your data is garbage, prediction is going to be garbage, right? So we don't want that. So here is my data which we are importing. This is simple data set. We have information about age of the customer, what job they are performing, their marital status, their education status, some other details. And it's not expected that you would know every detail about every single data set which is available or every field in that. You can drop fields which are not important to you, and then you can go ahead and leverage fields which are important to you. So that type of flexibility comes there. So I'm going ahead and say, okay, I'm happy. Let me create my data set. So I have created this data set, BESA bank data set. We have just created it.
I think here just want to make up, understand from you, Ashish, is that this is where your data skills are very important as an individual, right? Because what kind of data and tools like comfort level with Tableau or comfort level with Power BI or those Python libraries are very crucial here, right? That's very important. So it's a good thing to practice and get comfortable with.
It depends. In case you want to be like a hardcore machine learning engineer, probably yes. But hey, I am like a business person. I want to predict that what target has been given. Would I be able to meet that target based on the things I'm doing? So if I am purely a business person, I could still leverage this information, right? So obviously I would need to know some details about how these things, like what is a join, how I filter data, how I drop the duplicate rows. So some basic information is needed. And the good part is Canvas would be able to tell you about the data quality also. So if I am putting up a garbage data, it would be able to tell me that looks like there are a lot of duplicate values on that, or a lot of missing values are there, and give you, do you want to fix it? Yes, we can fix it. So those type of things will be there.
I mean, so you're telling me that, let's say if I have some business use case, I have some data, a lot of things, maybe not everything, but a lot of things can be done directly within SageMaker without the need of having, let's say, those pandas and those other Python libraries.
Not at all.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, so that we could do. See, nobody is stopping you from doing that if you need it. But if there is no use case, why I would invest my time? I am interested in getting the outcome from the model, right? If I can do everything from here without any customization, I would be probably happy doing it. Right.
No, that's very important information, because a lot of these things are actually roadblockers for a lot of people. I mean, till yesterday I was thinking, I have to understand pandas and I have to understand NumPy before I can do that. But you're telling me that's not needed. That's great news for me.
Yeah, see, that was how we started initially when machine learning started, but now we have matured enough to do all these things on our own. Like consider the phone we had before. It was all simple dial pad phone. Now we have smartphones, right? So this is how evolved things happening, and this is how AWS is making things possible. So come to one platform, do everything what you need here. So we have imported the data set, And now what I can do, I could go to my data wrangler and get started here. I could go ahead and say, okay, let me start import and prepare. I have my tabular data. I could have started with that. And that is my SageMaker S3 endpoint if I want to leverage that, or if I want to again get data from local upload, or I have a data set already imported. So I am coming up here. I can go to my Canvas data set and I have selected this Mesa Bank data set for me, right? Now, as soon as this data set comes in, what SageMaker would do, Canvas will do, it would start performing some analysis on that. See this. So on right side, what you are seeing is what we are trying to do right now. So we are doing a sampling on that. If you want, you could have selected few first K or startified or random. So I'm just selecting random pickup data from that. I don't need everything. By default, we are working with 50,000 items on that, 50K. Obviously, you could increase it, but this is what we recommend so that we have a holistic view of what is into your data set. Otherwise, if we just feed in 100 records and there are million records, we may not be able to identify things. So we recommend 50,000 rows. And once I'm happy, I would go ahead and say import. So now that data is visible to SageMaker Canvas, and it would be able to then perform some basic analysis as soon as I have got it. And the good part, Sharik, even if you do not know what is how to combine data set and all, what you could do, you could leverage capabilities where you can write things into your natural language, combine these two data set, or give me the histogram view, tell me who is the top performer. Those type of English based question, if you ask, this would still be able to get answered by it. Shouldn't be a problem.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I don't need to know Python for that.
No, not at all. Means I won't say it is not a good skill to have, but I'm saying it is not a blocker at all. So maybe you could explore this first, and then when you feel that you are hitting the limitation of the tool, that time probably you could go ahead and leverage Python or any other libraries afterwards.
I mean, yeah,
So
sorry, that's a good info, right? If I have some, I can do the high level stuff or the fundamental stuff directly, and need to go to any of those libraries only when I need to have more detailed analysis or more detailed cleaning and structuring of data. So that's great. It doesn't stop me from doing anything in
not
ML,
at all,
right?
not at all. So see this thing here. So I am here, and now it says that I have my, so I'm seeing everything visually. My data set came in, I have used that data type, and now I can go ahead here, see these three tabs here at the far, data flow, actual data, and any analysis which I would be performing. So I'm right now here, and I click on that plus and say what I need from that. So let's say the easiest thing I could go ahead and say, I want to get insight from the data. I want to see whether this data is clean data set. Is it having a lot of issues and all? So I don't need any complicated stuff. I am just saying get the data inside. And now I would be able to select it. So I have selected analysis name. Now I would select a target column. So on that data set, which is CSV, there are a lot of columns are there. And one of the column is there why, whether this customer has bought a product or not. So this is our main column for this particular example, that what I am leveraging. Now you would say how I came to that discussion or how I have identified that column. So that you should check into the SageMaker workshop. So consider this is the important column for our data set, which says which customer has already bought some of the products of us and now want to predict that whether they would be retained for a long time or would they be buying new product or they would be helping us in increasing the sales or not. So I have selected that particular column, which is target column. Now I'm doing a perfect thing here, which is purely based on whether they would be retained with me or whether they would leave my company or whether they will buy a product or whether they will not buy a product. So that is what we call as a classification problem. This is little math. So I am classifying a user as a potential buyer, or I am saying this user is not a potential buyer. So I'm just classifying them. In case you need number based information, like, okay, this is square foot size of my house in this area, what could be the potential payment I could get because of that, or potential rent I could get, or this is the data set from last 2 years of sales, tell me what I should be able to sell into next year. So if you need numerical information, that time you would be performing regression on that. But right now I need to just classify yes or no type of decision. That time I would be using the classification problem type here. Does it make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Now, I want to run it on full data set or sample data set is purely up to me. So I could go ahead and say run it on sample data set only, and I have started creating.
Wait, when you said sample data set, is that the one we selected at 50,000 sample size?
That 50,000 on, yeah.
Okay. So we can select whether we want to have that data sample size or the entire data set just at one go.
See, it
Is
doesn't
there,
make sense. The data set can be huge, right? And this
right.
is happening into memory of that machine which has started for you. So
Mhm.
either you need to bring up a bigger machine and then make adjustment. Better that I just work on sample first, and I can obviously select a random sample, so I won't have lot of misconfiguration in that.
Mhm. So, I mean, if I got this right, if you have a very huge amount of data, it's good to have like break that into multiple chunks of sample data size. And if you have a standard data size which is not very huge, or if you have enough power, you have bigger size of machine, just go ahead and use the whole data set. Depends on the
Agree on
situation.
that. Agree on that. Yeah.
So it's more about the compute.
Correct.
What kind of compute you have versus the amount of data.
Yeah, agree.
Mm.
And there is a
Okay.
question from Pawan. So SageMaker Data Wrangler is used for data cleansing and transformation. Yes, Pawan, that is one
Mm.
of the tasks which you could achieve, and I show you some of the things. So it is generating report on that. It has detailed this information and identified these things, right? So see this. First thing, it told me about what are the information about the data, what we refer as metadata. Are there any duplicate rows, which is very commonly into data set, which can like
Mm.
push your analysis off track? So there is nothing less of now. As you could see, there are no high priority warning for my data. It is a clean data set, so I do not have a lot of things. Otherwise, I would be getting that information here, and it will tell me that what is happening and how could I fix it. So here it is checking what features I have, my duration is there, what are my information related to that, missing values if there are, it would be able to tell, and then it is giving me all the information as we see here. So prediction power. Now, just by looking at that, looks like this could be the more important factor or more important feature for my analysis, because this has impact on the outcome which will be generated. So this is how I can identify easily that what are the most prominent field. Now I have some duplicate rows also, but it is just not even 1%, so I would ignore it. In case you want to fix it, there are tools available, you could have did that, anomalous samples and all. So this gives me lots and lots of information as we see,
Wow.
right? So here are my histogram detail, and I can see what visualization of my data is, how it is distributed, what features it is able to extract. And I did not have to do anything at all, just bring the data set, and it is able to identify the most important aspect associated with that.
I mean, this is just wow for me because if I summarize this, you selected a data set, general data set. So it could be public data set, it could be something specific to your company.
Anything.
You
Yes.
imported that into SageMaker, selected a few drop downs, and then you have this comprehensive report. And how long? I think it took maybe 10 seconds
Oh, too
for
many
to check.
pages on that. Too many pages on that.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, it's just a report. Now let's say I identified, okay, based on this report, I have to perform some operation on the data set. I want to drop some column. I don't need something, or I want to perform analysis, or I want to do something else. So let me show that too. So see this. So I have this data flow. I started from source. I bought it as a data type, and then I have generated an insight report on that. Now I don't want to use this, so I could leave it. Now I want to use this data type and maybe perform some transformations on top of it. So I could go ahead and select OK. I have to now perform some transformation on that. What type of transformation you need? So just go ahead and say, let me add that. Now see this option, we say chat for data prep. So you could go ahead and say, please drop all the column which has negative values. Done, and it will be done for you. You do not need to do anything at all. It is all machine learning. Behind the scene, it can take natural language question and deliver the answers for you. Shouldn't be an issue. So that easy it is.
Wow. I mean,
Right.
again, I'm just comparing it in my head, like, in Python, when you use pandas, you have to understand the syntax to do all of this,
I
right?
agree on that.
Remove duplicates and all these things, dropping off some of the values. I mean, it's not that complicated, but it's not that easy as well. You have to give some time to
You have to
kind of
know
be
it. Yeah,
comfortable with
exactly.
that. You have to know it. So, yeah.
Now I show you, this has 300 plus transformation built in. So let me add a transformation here. My requirement is pretty simple, that this is my data set which I got. Now I want to make some changes on that. Let's say I'm not interested in some of the component which are there. So I want to do what? I want to drop some columns.
Mhm.
Now see this. So it gives me what you are looking for. We can help you to drop corrupt images, drop duplicate, handle
Mhm.
missing value, and manage column, where you can do move, drop, duplicate, or rename column in the data set, right? So I could go ahead and say, okay, I am interested into managing the drop column, or I could go ahead perform the time series drop, dimension reduce, all this information. Keeping it simple, I want to drop columns. All right,
Mhm.
tell me what columns you want to drop, and it would be then put into your own environment. So here I have all this data set, And now I am going to go ahead and say, hey, I am not interested in few of the columns, and let's go ahead and let's drop some of the column which are not important for my machine learning inferences or all. So I could go ahead, select, let's say I want this column to be removed. I don't want this column. Maybe the P days is not important, which is payment day when they get paid or something. Maybe I'm not interested into these conference indexes or price indexes or variable rate they get paid on. So I could go ahead and see this. I just selected it. And now I could go ahead and say, okay, I'm happy with that. What would happen based on what I selected? I could preview it and it will tell me that based on that, I am going to drop these columns for you. Similarly, I could have selected a merge operation. I could have selected a filter operation or a sort operation. It will show me, I feel, yes, that is what I wanted. I could go ahead and say add, and now my data has been dropped from these columns. So those columns do not exist. But one thing I want to make sure here, you're aware that,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
So we are not touching the individual CSV file you had. You still have the pristine copy of that CSV file, right? So it's not like I'm messing up with that data. We got a copy and we are now trying to manage things on the data set which we got.
Very interesting. Actually, what I was about to say, Ashish, is that I mean, the previous step which you performed, it's in a way helping you create a prompt which is taken as an input by the data set to perform those activities. You don't even need to know the prompt.
Not at all. Not at all. So see, if you are not sure that what things exist, so now see this, what happened from this branch happened and I could a drop column. Now I want to go ahead here and say, hey, it looks like I need to chat with this data for preparation. So I could go ahead and then perform the chatting also. So it is preparing my data for chat and I could write my as questions here and that will generate. So let's say some question, plot a bar chart for the column P outcome. How many unique values are there in the column month or the column age? Let's say if I have that column, just giving an example. So I could just go ahead, run this, and then it would then start performing the operation for me. So I just ask question, gives me output, even no need to understand what is this and that. So these are 78 unique values in the age column. Simple. Get it? And this is exploration. So I feel, okay, I'm done. I don't want to make any changes further there. So I could go ahead here again in data flow. So from here, I could then start performing more operation. Or what if I feel that, okay, now I have cleaned all my data. I do not need to perform anything on that. Whatever I wanted, I have achieved. So I can now start performing the preparation of the model, training of the model, as we call it. So we did take the data. We selected the drop duplicate. We did the drop column option. And now I could go ahead and say, okay, let me now start creating of a model directly from there. I don't need to know what command to do and this all. So I could say export data and start model building in the canvas. So this would start understanding the data set, would start creating the model, and then a model would be generated. And afterward, I would be able to keep moving forward from there. So let me call it BESA model. I am performing a predictive analysis. I am predicting about my customer. I could have done text analysis. I could have fine-tuned, but I'm predicting it. And what my column is, the column which I'm predicting is Y. And I go ahead and say, okay, export and create model. So now behind the scene, all the required resources has been called in. And now my model is getting ready for me. So that's what simple it is to get started with a model. So now I am creating a model. It will show me what it is happening behind the scene, what kind of analysis and all. And once the model is ready, we would, and one more thing here, Sharik, it would not just perform one model training. Behind the scene, it would perform multiple hyperparameter based training. So one model with XYZ setting, another model with PQR setting, and whatever comes out as the best would be then shown as my default model on that. So multiple training sessions are happening behind the scene, and through that, we are moving forward with it.
So in a way, it is suggesting and selecting the models for us as well. We don't need to worry about which is the right model or which is the most appropriate model. That's also
we just said, hey, I want my operation to be performed. I want a regression or I want a classification. That's all the technical decision I have made, and rest of the thing is taken care by the service itself.
Okay, nice.
Okay, now I could go with quick build. As the name says, quick build. but it may not be very accurate build for me. So I could go ahead and do that. So if I am interested only in this, I could go ahead and perform a quick build. If I feel no, I have to make some changes, so I could go ahead here and say, hey, I want to go with a standard build, but in standard build, I want to make some changes. So I could go ahead here and say your Y into 2 categories. I want to configure this particular data set, and here I could put some setting like maximum candidate runtime. I want it to be running only maximum up to maybe a 30-minute or 20 minutes. So I'm just saying let's run it for 30 minutes only, because model training can take time and it can go through multiple iterations of it if the need be. But I just selected 30-minute, and now I would go ahead and say let me start with the standard build. Done. My model training has started and my model would be ready, and see this. So build done. I would analyze the different model which will be generated. I would perform some prediction to check whether the model is working as expected or not. And then last thing I would do would be just deploy. This is how simple it is to get started. Makes sense?
Perfect. Perfect.
Ramakrishna had a question. Can we try SageMaker in free tier account? So Ramakrishna, yes, you can try in SageMaker free account, but be aware about the instances you use. So check what resources of SageMaker are free. Some of these would be chargeable, so just be aware about it. Like, so if you're using some advanced feature, maybe they are chargeable, but a lot of things you could do for free.
Yeah, I'll just put that link of the pricing page of SageMaker. Just be careful, read through it, and see which components are free up to what limit. So you do have certain free limits. Just be aware what is free and then use accordingly. There are things which you can try free of cost without incurring any charges.
Good. So we did that, and now what we see that my model is getting into training. So time elapsed 46 seconds. It is going through standard build. It is going through the training of the model, and then it will be showing me all the details which we have as it is going on to me. Just to save time, what I have done this training beforehand, and now I am going ahead to use it. Question is there, do you need to set aside test data for checking your model right? Yes, that would be a good thing to do. So we can have some sample data set which we will use to verify afterwards, right? So yes, we should have verification data, because there's no point to test the model with the same data it was trained on. It would obviously come up with the right result. So that's why it is better that we split the data and then start from there. Should not be a problem. And that you could do from Data Wrangler also. You could say drop 50,000 last columns or 50,000 column or rows from the middle, and I would use that as a data set for testing purposes. So yeah, that can be done too. Okay. It is included in AI credits. I'm not sure on that, Anas. So you need to check. Probably it should be, because it is credit. Credit does not differentiate between different services. Credit is credit. So in that 300, 500, whatever you get, you should be able to perform anything in that. Should not be an issue.
Correct.
So see this. So this model which I'm showing here is in build, which we started. This is BESA model, and this is the model which I had trained yesterday. So this model has a version. It has a target column, same thing. It has 2 category prediction, and it has been ready. So this is ready view. This one is still into training, but this one is ready. So after 30 minutes of time, it would come into this stage, and then we can move forward from there. So this is my model which is ready. So this model is version 1. Automatically the versioning is happening because I may want to retrain the model, to fine tune something, to adjust something, to make changes. So I could go ahead and do these things, not be a problem. See this. My model is 91% accurate, which is a good number, right? So this shows to me that 91% of the time my model would be doing accurate predictions for me. And the factor which is the most compelling for the outcome is duration. So impact of duration column, that how long that customer was with my bank, would compel them to buy a product or not buy a product, which makes sense, right? If I am into relationship with a customer or bank for a long time, probably I'm trusting them, and I would be more than likely a out member for buying the product. So this is the most impactful column on that, and this is how the distribution looks like. So we did that, and now my border is in a nice way.
A quick question on that. That like accuracy, when it says that 91% of the times it will be accurate or it is accurate, how does it come to that conclusion? I mean, right? So we have just created the model from a data set, right? So how does it come to that conclusion that 91% of the times it is going to be correct?
So model would be, when the training process is going on, it is challenging itself also again with multiple models. So let me show this model leaderboard. So see this. What
Mhm.
I am using is this particular model, which is with this detail 91%. It had trained different model also along the way, and these were the outcome which was received by it. So this was one model which was having this kind of score 91, 89, all these. So this is, it is comparing by doing things on different model and coming out, hey, I am accurate or not. So I tested it with X model, it gave me output was positive. I tested it again in Y, was it positive also or not? So that is how it is coming to the accuracy of the information.
Right. So during the training phase, the
It
number of
goes through
iterations
all
it
these
is
things.
running, based on that, it is calculating, okay, this many times it was correct and this many times it was not correct. And then it is giving you that number, 91%. Okay.
Makes
Makes
sense.
sense.
Exactly. And it shows you a lot of other metrics also. So it is also possible that sometime it may be doing a false positive or false negative, right? It can happen. So that information is also available. So if I go ahead here and check its scoring, see this information. So here it shows me that if the model predicts no, it is correct 97% of the time. For the values that are no, the model predict 92% of the time them to be no. So this whole information is given to me. This is my scoring as I'm seeing that prediction versus actual, what is the correct, what are the false positive things. So these all information is there, and I have here advanced metrics. In that, what I was referring as a confusion metrics. So here I could see how many time true positive were identified, how many time true negative was identified. So my model is pretty good here because the data was good, and that's why I am having very less percentage of false positive, false negative here as we see.
Okay, that's
Right.
interesting.
So this, my model is ready, right? So model is predicting whether it will be yes or no. It is predicting that. I have all the details here, and I can go to model leaderboard and find all the information. Now, next thing will be that, okay, now you are ready. I want to predict something. Means now I have created the model, and now I want to put some input data, and based on that I want to tell you, you should tell me model whether it would be a right output or not. So I could come here in the, after analyzing, I checked all the things. What we did here, Sharik, that I just selected the default thing, right? I, from all the model which were selected for me, I said I want to use that as a default, but it is not mandatory. Maybe you could go ahead and say, no, I feel this one is much better assigned to me, so I could change it to default model. So I could have selected any of them to be my default if I don't want to go with what SageMaker has come up with. Okay.
So SageMaker already gives you sort of a template, but you can definitely modify and customize based on your.
Modify, select, and go forward from there. So that is completely possible. And now I come to predict. And for prediction, I could go ahead and say, hey, I just want to test one prediction. So these were the values. Now see this. Based on this data set which is given to me, the prediction is coming out to be no, that the customer won't be buying based on this data set. Let's say if I go ahead and make some changes here. If let's say that customer was with us for these many long days, and now I say, okay, let me update the prediction. What would be my output? So now I sent one request to model and said, hey model, tell me based on the new data set you are seeing now, what should be the outcome coming up with that. So right now it says still 60% possibility is no, possibility of yes increase, it is around 39%. So this is how I should be able to test a single prediction if I need to, but probably this would not be a use case for most of the companies. So we would be going ahead and performing this thing, which is we call, hey, I want to perform a testing either manually or automatically. In a manual setting, I could again select a test data set. Like I selected input data set, I could have selected a test data set and said, okay model, go ahead and perform testing based on that. So we could have selected it, and then this is not the same data set because this is different columns dropped, but yes, you would be still able to perform prediction. So now it is performing the predictions for you, and that result, like here I did for before, so here I could have got that information, download it, preview it, delete, or send it to QuickSight, where I can again see things into visual way, or S3 drop, so I can put it into S3 and get started from here. So this is how prediction would also be displayed to me. So I now know what happened, what was the outcome, and what was the actual model doing behind the scene for me. Right. Questions, Sadiq? All good so far?
Yeah, all good. I'm just kind of in awe of this tool, It is doing so many
This is
things.
so
It
easy,
was
isn't it? Means if
so
you had to
easy
do
and
these things manually, consider how much
exactly.
time, effort, and resources
I
would be
mean,
needed for you. When you are
anybody
pay for use.
anybody in this room who has done these kind of things 3, 4, 5 years back, they must
Exactly.
be amazed
They
with
would
the
relate
results.
how easy it is.
Exactly. Yeah. There is one question, Ashish, from Ramakrishna. Will SageMaker model analyze and provide any data issues in the data sets? I think
So
that
yeah,
part
so
we
when we did exactly.
quality of the data, right? When we were talking
Exactly.
initially.
So when in the data wrangler, it was
Mm.
able to tell me where there were issues in my data set or not. So when we selected it, I was able to view all this information, right? So that is good. Yes, it can happen. Question
Sure.
from Esteban is why are there are so many models listed? See, we had not asked SageMaker to use a specific type of model or specific algorithm. And that's why it is trying all the permutation combination that, hey, in what method I could get the most accuracy. So it knows based on the data set, it has its own machine learning. It knows based on this data set, probably this algorithm or this combination of algorithms would be much better. So that's why it is going through all these things. So there are multiple ways of solving a problem, and which one is the most effective. That's why there are multiple models are being listed by SageMaker. So it's not like this is the only thing, you have to live with it, no other changes required. So that's why multiple models are being used. And that removes the biases, right? If I have only one model, I have to always trust whatever comes out of it. But it has been tested with multiple models. So I am now sure about the output which I am getting. I am more accurately receiving the output. Now, currently what we have done, Sharik, is still within the purview of SageMaker Canvas. Now, what if there is a business user or a marketing person comes in and says, hey, this is the customer, and let me know whether this would be a customer who would be interested in buying the product or not. So what we need to do now, once I am happy with the model, I tested it, I performed prediction, I checked everything manually, automatically, I would be probably then going ahead and will deploying it. Deploy means now I am giving you an endpoint where you can send your request to. Right. So deployment is important because till this point it is like ready. I have done every testing and it is there, but I have not put it into public space where somebody could use it. Now, public space doesn't mean that it is now open to public and anyone can use it. You can just expose it to an endpoint, and through that endpoint, you should be able to then leverage multiple type of questions which are coming to it. So let's say if this model is to be used for a credit card fraud detection, probably I would want it to run 24/7 because those transactions can happen anytime, right? But if I feel no, this data would be coming on a weekly basis and I want to run model only weekly, so I could run it into a batch analysis mode. So I don't have to keep it running 24/7 and I would only be using it when I need it. So that will be way of saving the charges. So SageMaker gives you multiple endpoint. From this interface right now, what I am able to do, only able to create a real-time endpoint which is continuously running, and through that my inferences can happen. So I'm here and now I could select, okay, I'm going to deploy this model and I am going to use instances behind the scenes. So here I am selecting that which specific instance I want to use it to deploy. This is where your charges would also calculate. So I'm using one instance only, maybe not the best choice for production system, but to get started, this is a really good choice to have. And now I say, okay, I am happy with my model. Let's deploy this particular model. So now whatever the behind the scene things are required, whatever packages are needed, whatever security configuration is needed, all of that is being packaged, put it into a container format, and on this particular machine which I have selected T2 dot something, my model would be started, and now I would get an endpoint to connect to. So this will become my endpoint and I would start sending my request to this once it is ready. So endpoint is where I would send my inferences, and I don't have to worry about anything behind the scene, what is happening, why it is happening. Highly available service would be maintaining all the required things, and then I could collect metrics. So whatever model is doing, how much time it is taking for prediction, how much time it is taking for running inferences, or how much time it is giving positive or negative inferences or output, I could be able to check that and probably use that as an input to retrain my model again if I need to.
Okay. I'm thinking something here. So I mean, normally, if it is not an ML application, if it is a standard, let's say some web application, generally when we have to expose the endpoints, we have to use services like I don't know, API gateway, Cognito type services. So looks like all those tasks are being done automatically, everything by SageMaker all by itself. we don't need to worry about the complexity of understanding APIs, working with Swagger or Postman type stuff. Everything is there inbuilt here in SageMaker. That's what I'm looking at. Is that right?
Yeah, that is true. So this
Mm.
is what because what we have created, Sharik, here is something called a real-time endpoint. But
Mm.
there are other type of endpoint also. So you could have done that thing if you need it. Now, what you could have done, let me draw it simply so that probably it would be easy for you to relate to. So
Mm.
what I have right now, that I have my model running. This is the model. This is running inside a container somewhere, and
Mhm.
that container is on a EC2 machine.
Mhm.
As I have used the real-time endpoint, what AWS has done, they have created a load balancer for me. Because if you remember, there was option to deploy it on 2 instances, right?
Right.
So
Mm.
this load balancer is taking care of sending request, and now I am just connecting to the endpoint which is there.
Okay. So
This is one of it.
it is doing the containerization for me. It is doing
Exactly.
load balancing for me, and it is doing like the service of what API exposure, what we call, right?
Health
Exposing the
checks, all
APIs.
the things related to auto
So
scaling, you could have done all
exactly.
these things on
Right.
that.
Wow.
So that is one thing. Or you could say, no, I don't need this type of load balancer. I just
Mm.
want to deploy it on EC2, and I would be connecting it from my application directly. And maybe this application is running in one of my VPC and this one is in another VPC. I could have created my VPC endpoint for also that, so that I don't have to expose it publicly at all. So that could be another approach of doing things. Or
Okay.
if you feel, no, I need to have some pre-processing done, so you could have put a Lambda function in front first, that augmented by your API gateway. So now your users come here. Through
Mm.
API gateway, I can perform all authentication, authorization for them, and then maybe I can do some pre-processing on the Lambda and then only send the request to my model. So there are multiple ways you should
Yes.
be able to utilize for deployment of your model. This is just
Mm.
one method, but yes, there are multiple ways purely depending on your use cases.
Right. And I think one of the key factors would be there. Whom do you want to eventually expose this to? Is it internal
Exactly.
departments, or is it your vendors? Because most of the companies, they have the partner network, right? So based on that, you would go with different architectures, right?
And most of the time, I don't expect that a user would be directly invoking these models. So the
Mhm.
user would be working on a application, let's say a new customer bank opening form, and in that there would be option that predict that how long this customer would stay with the bank, right? Or predict the credit score of this customer, or predict the fault or the fraudulent transaction this has done before. So that is what we would do. So user would probably not directly integrate or interact with model. They would have some more application, and those application would be making these call and displaying the
Mm.
data for the user. That is
So
probably should be the way of doing things.
mostly app to app communication, which is happening here.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So we have
So see
a
this
few
now,
questions, Jason, in
my
the.
model is ready. And now
Mhm.
if I want to leverage it, I could test it. I could update configuration, delete deployment. So I say I want to test my deployment. I could have selected some detail, and now I could have modified those values and send those requests to my model. So let's say I say age is going to be like 100 year or something. Now I want to perform a prediction. So I could go ahead and say, okay, update my prediction. Now, this is not like generating an image or something here, so it is not very creatively seen by you, but behind the scene, even if it was image generation or maybe text generation, concept would be same. You take the data, provide
Mm.
input to model, train your model, and based on that, your output would be generated for you.
Okay. Very good.
So, Asna, is there any quota limit? Can it auto scale? Yes. If it is real time endpoint, yes, it would auto scale. Remember, I shared a post on LinkedIn where I talked about the different deployment models. So, yes, it can auto scale if you have put it behind the scene. But remember, I have put it only two. I would still be able to configure some setting, and through which I should be able to then control how much I want to auto scale, right? I don't want to auto scale up to infinity, because otherwise I would end up paying a lot of money. So that is what can be controlled. And just a quick summary, Sharik, here. There are
Mhm.
4 ways I could have deployed my model: real time, batch, or asynchronous, or serverless. Right now, if you remember, I selected give me 2 EC2 machine and on that run my model.
Mhm.
Means I am paying for that EC2 machine even if it is not running any inferences. If I
Mm.
don't need that, let's say I have a spiky food delivery app, which gets busy only in the lunchtime and dinner time. Afterward, nobody uses it. So that time I could say, rather than I manage a ML instance, let AWS run it on their own container. So this time I could create a serverless inference. So I do not pay when the model is not running. I only pay when inferences happen. Other options which I see are based on the instances, like I have a real-time inference which we deployed, which will keep on running automatically. There are batch which will start when I need, and it will take input maybe from a S3 bucket or any other source, perform all the output, and send it back to S3. In asynchronous, I have an application. Somebody came in and said, this is my customer information, invoke the model and tell me the output which is required. So I could have run asynchronous inferences also. So these are some inferences which you could have leveraged.
Mm-hmm. So there are multiple techniques, and again, I mean, I think one of the key factors here is what kind of application you have. Is it
Exactly.
busy all the time? Is it spiky? This is something we discuss in a lot in our choice when we are choosing what kind of compute we want. Is it virtual machine, containers, or Lambda function? So I think it's going on those similar lines there.
Exactly. So I hope this thing is clear and people were able to understand this concept. If you want to do it on your own, SageMaker Immersion Lab link is there. I would send it again into email. And this is a good start, small demo to go ahead and understand some of the capabilities of SageMaker. But I would still say it's damn easy now. Previously, it was too complicated. Canvas made it so easy.
That's true. And I see that the workshop is very, very comprehensive. It's very useful with a lot of videos I can see from reInvent, from self-paced content. So I think it's very good information there on the on that page workshop.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So question coming from Jatin is, in real-time inference source cannot be S3? No, it will be then a bad job, Jatin, right? If it is coming to S3, then how it will be real-time? Because you are getting data into S3 first, and then based on the S3 event, something is getting triggered. So it is not real-time. Real-time means there is no temporary storage. We are directly interacting with the model. Here, you are getting into S3, and from S3, you are triggering something to get to model. So it will obviously become asynchronous inference. It will not be a real-time inference.
I think just to add to that, I believe if we talk about real time or near real time, I think we are looking at Kinesis, we are looking at Kafka, those kind of things as inputs to the model, I believe.
Exactly. Good. So hopefully people enjoyed and learned something new. And I would now hand over to Prasad. And if you have any questions, people who attended, feel free to send them across, and we would be happy to answer as much as we can. And hopefully you would be learning a lot. And keep sharing these feedback on LinkedIn or any other social media, so that we also know that how you are enjoying, what could we have done better, or what we could have improved, so that you get the most output for the time you are investing, right? So thanks, Sharik. Interesting question, and I like the questions. Parna's questions were too many questions, and then this is little different way of asking question. But yeah, I like both, because there is customers are of different type, right? You do not see every single type of customer. There would be some customers who will be very curious, some customer who would be not that curious, and you may have to talk to them a lot to get the questions answered, or make them to ask questions. So, but it was interesting. Thank you. Coming back to Prasad.
Great session. Yeah, this is where I need to upskill a bit more on the AI ML part. And yeah, love the way you folks have, brought Amazon SageMaker to life, especially the Canvas part. Cool. So should we switch to the behavioral part?
Yes.
I know it's Diwali weekend.
I'll drop off from the screen and let Prasad carry on.
Okay, cool. I'll share my screen. So folks, today we'll be talking about anatomy of a star response. When I say anatomy, means we'll first obviously look into what is star response, but I will dive deep into what exactly makes a star response a good answer, right? And anyone who have been following the newsletter, you would see similar examples, but it will be still to have a good refresher. So what exactly is a star format, or why it is so famous? It's a structured method to answer behavioral interview questions. Now, when I talk about behavioral interview questions, what exactly it is, they are mainly scenario-based questions. So there are multiple types of questions that can be asked, technical, and then some hypothetical questions about what would you do in a specific scenario. Star format comes into picture where it asks you about your experience, that how have you done a specific thing. Like, tell me about a scenario when you had to handle a difficult customer. Tell me about a scenario when you had a critical feedback from your manager, how you handled it. Tell me about a scenario when you had to take a decision without enough data. Tell me about a scenario when you had to say no to a customer. For those kinds of questions, the behavioral scenario where the interviewer would like to understand your experience, STAR provides a pretty good standard methodology of answering those questions. Now, STAR, just a quick refresher, it's an acronym for situation, task, action, result. Situation, and we'll look into an example, right? And we'll look into a basic example, and then we'll enhance it to a better example, right? So situation is the context or background of your example. Here it is very important, and at the end I'll give you a checklist about what you should when you're preparing your STAR format answers, which is quite common in any of the FAANG company interviews, and even in other companies now they have started asking behavioral questions. And especially if you're looking for interviewing at Amazon, this is like a non-negotiable thing. You need to know what is STAR and how to answer in STAR format. So in situation, it's about the context or background of your example, and you don't need to be vague here. You need to be exactly telling in a way, think about you're helping the interviewer visualize the situation you were in. If you're able to make the interviewer visualize, then it will be really, I would say, good job that you would have done. The problem generally here, what I've seen in my interviewing experience, is that the candidate does not realize that the interviewer would not be from the same background. So they might be using the terms which interviewer might not be understanding. So try and ensure that whatever you like to communicate is the exact thing you're able to communicate. And when that becomes a good solid base, that you have set the good context, then comes to the task, which is what specific challenge or responsibility you face, like what exactly you had to do. How is in the action, that what you did is in the action, but task is what has to be done. When you started, what was the overall outcome, what was the overall goal that you had to achieve? That is task. A lot of people ask me this question, that how to differentiate between a task and an action. And that's a very subtle difference. Task is something that it has to be done or you need to achieve. Action is what exact steps you took to achieve that task. And then the result, which is the outcomes. And this is where I generally say that in the situation, tell about the problem and the result, tie it back to the situation. And then it would be, in a way, a complete story. So let's look at through an example, right? So if you talk about situation, and we'll talk about simple example about if I was working as a cloud solution architect, and we had to move our mission critical workloads to cloud. Right? When you're setting up a context, the context is that, okay, there was a situation where we had to move workloads from on-prem to cloud, and I was working the cloud solution architect. It sets the context, right, which is great. But it does not provide the full picture to the interviewer. Like, when did this event happen? Are you talking about your recent experience? Or are you talking about 5 years before? Where were you working? How big was the workload? It was mission critical, but how big was the workload? You need to give them the full context so that they can appreciate the full complexity. So if we look into the example of how we can improve that, instead of saying just I was working as a cloud solution architect, you can always say I was working as a cloud solution architect at specific company. If you can give the company name, it's great. And then you can provide the timeline and talk about specific thing, like 80% of our mission critical applications were running on edge premises, causing frequent outages. Now it gives the exact scenario, like, context about, okay, there were frequent outages, and that is why you had to move your mission critical workloads. Otherwise, what is the reason that you had to move the mission critical workloads? And then it says our CIO had set an aggressive goal. Now, when you say this, our CIO, that means it has shown you as a senior position that you do interact with CIOs. So you have, in your experience, that level of stakeholder management to migrate 50% of these applications to cloud within 6 months. Now, talking about specific what needs to be done with specific timelines and what has to be achieved. So in the situation, it is much more clear now that what exactly had to be done. So Asna, you have a question that what's the ideal time frame to complete a star answer? I know internet is divided on this. Few people say it should be 1 minute, and few people say it can go on. I generally say keep it around 3 to 4 minutes. Do not ramble for 10 minutes, but in attempt to complete it within 1 minute, do not leave the right details. 2 to 3 minutes would be a sweet spot, and max 4 minutes, I would say. Right? It also depends upon how you feel the interviewer is reacting. It's about if at some point you can pause and ask that, do you want to elaborate on this during the mainly action part? We'll talk about the action. So generally in star format, focus most on the action part, what you as an individual have done, and we'll come to that. And I'll also give an example. So for example, this example I'm giving, it is going to be elaborative. And then I'll also provide an example, which is going to be a more concise one. But when you prepare your answers, prepare the elaborate version first, because it will help you answer the follow-up questions. But when you're answering, initially the first answer, you can leave few of the details and then come back to it in the follow-up questions. But for preparation, ensure that you have all the data, everything ready that you need to collect. So that's the situation. Now coming to task. So we task is specific challenge. The situation now it is pretty clear that, okay, mission critical workloads needs to be migrated from on-prem to cloud, and then the time frame is 6 months. In the task, so the task was to figure out how to move the applications. So it's not just one application, right? It's multiple applications. So it needs to figure out how to move the applications within the given time frame. And obviously, once you migrate, you need to ensure that everything works correctly. Migration should not disrupt your day-to-day operations. If we enhance this and try and make it better. So the task was to identify, prioritize, and migrate critical applications to AWS within 6 months. So instead of just saying that, figure out how to move the applications, you have multiple things. When you migrate an application, there are multiple steps that goes on to picture. Like at AWS, we do have something called map, where we have stages like assess, mobilize, migrate. So here, if we see, it says the task was to identify out of those workloads, which of the workloads needs to be prioritized, and then migrate them. And that requires assessing applications and designing secure architecture, and then creating migration plan, minimizing operational disruptions. So you need to know about these things, and if you have done it, you'll be able to explain them easily. The timelines were aggressive because you did talk about the 6 months time frame, so they were aggressive, and the urgency was there because of the aging infrastructure. So you need to show that how critical the task was and why your involvement was important. And then comes the action. Now, this is where you need to spend most of your time, both while actually answering during the interview and also while preparation, so that you have all the data ready. You don't need to put all the data at once during the interview, but there will be follow-up questions. We do ask a lot of follow-up questions. As an interviewer, they try and peel the onion to understand to what depth you'll be able to go. Now, and the action here it is, I looked at the applications, decided to start the migration of a core ERP system. That was the most critical. Then setting up the AWS accounts and work with different teams to migrate the application. and there were some application architecture changes needed to make the apps work in the cloud. It is fine, but there'll be a lot of follow-up questions. Like, what do you mean by some? Looked into the application, decided to start migration. How decided to start migration? Why ERP core was decided? So on and so forth. So this is where you can have an answer like this, and which will show you also as a senior, depending upon at what level you have been working in your organization, can always showcase your seniority. See, interviewer would not know at what position you have worked unless you tell them. And when I say tell them, it's not that saying that I'm working as a senior. You're telling about through your actions, that what actions you have done. If you start something like this, to begin, I led a cross-functional team. It itself shows that, okay, you must be a team leader at least, right? In conducting a thorough analysis of application portfolio. So you did a thorough analysis. So you are not simply thinking about picking up some applications, did a thorough analysis and considered factors like, and this is where your seniority automatically shows, business criticality, dependencies, architectural complexity to gain complete understanding. So you took the first high-level stock architecture. And then based on the assessment, you took the ownership to lead the migration of the core ERP system, which was critical. And then see this line. This migration was crucial as the overall growth, it would serve as a blueprint for future migrations. So obviously the company does not have only just one application. Once you migrate this, you have a lot of best practices, learnings that will be coming out of it. So it will serve as a blueprint. So if you're a person who's thinking about all this, then that means that you're showcasing your, think big. Then it comes to design the multi-tier AWS architecture for the application, ensuring high availability and scalability. And you talk about more things that you would have done in that, like example, developing a CloudFormation template or reducing the migration time. So you'll have your own data points to talk about those. No need to, as I said, say them all at once initially, but have those data ready, have those points ready if they dive deep into. And yeah, additionally, like I conducted several dry runs and extensive testing to minimize potential disruptions. And after this, it will be the result part. So before diving it, let me see if there are any questions. So should we mention only my role when a problem has been resolved by the team? It depends, right? I generally prefer to state the role at the very beginning in the situation itself. What's your role? Where are you working? What is the timeline? 6 months ago, I was working with XYZ company as a cloud solutions architect. That sets within the first, sentence, you set the context that this is what you are, and then you can come into that. Now, I understand all of us work in team and we have a tendency of answering it. We did this. As a team, we achieved this, which is a good thing. But at interviewer would be interested in knowing what you as an individual did in that team. What was your specific contribution? To that, even I use this technique when I interviewed with AWS. I'll first talk about what we did as a team, and then I'll talk about my specific contribution in that. And then, you'll not left the interviewer hanging that he's all talking about the we. Then you can very quickly talk about we implemented XYZ or we migrated XYZ in this and this time frame. I worked at this particular core ERP application. I wrote the CloudFormation templates, and you can talk about specific things. Cool. The next question is, let's say I have worked on desktop and web apps, but not on cloud project. However, I have upskilled myself outside of work and did some certifications. How do I convince the interviewer that I work on cloud? Very good question. Now, it depends upon, very frankly, role to role, right? When I interviewed with AWS, I had zero cloud experience or AWS experience. And I was very upfront. And I, talked about the other projects that I worked on. And they were completely fine with it. Because the role that I was interviewing for, it was that, okay, mainly for Microsoft workload specific role to migrate and modernize in AWS. So I had the source knowledge, not the destination knowledge. And they were okay with that. But if you are interviewing for a role which needs the cloud experience, then it might be a bit difficult. It will not be an easy thing. The best way would be to do the side projects and somehow showcase them during the interview. Have them specifically in your resume that you built this XYZ side projects. And during the interview, if you're able to showcase them that this is what I've built outside of my current job, and that will give you a brownie points because it showcases that you are learning on your own. It showcases your bias for action. So it showcases that you have a growth mindset. Cool. Now moving to the result on that. Finally, after those actions, it can be we managed to move few applications. Now this is where I see this again and again when people answer the questions. I interview a lot, and they do not quantify it exactly what has exactly happened. So we managed few applications. Instead of few, give them a number. Within 6 months, applications are working better in the cloud. What does better mean? So a lot of these are like kind of weasel words which try and avoid. In the results, this is where it's your moment to shine, to showcase the impact that you have made, and that will be really helpful. So instead of that, let's try writing result in this way. We successfully migrated our core ERP system in 4 months. The system's response time decreased by 40%. And we improved scalability, handling a 200% increase in concurrent users during peak periods. We reduced the infrastructure cost for this application by 30%. Now, this is giving specific stats. Now, I understand that you might not be having the visibility of these level of stats when you're working on specific projects, which is okay. But when you're preparing, that's when you need to try and find this information. Because see, the best thing that you can do right now is that try and start understanding the business beyond the specific project that you're working on. That why are we doing this? What are the business metrics? So that for the future, at least what you're doing for your current projects. For the past projects, and I've done this during my interview also, right? For the past projects which I've done 3 or 4 years ago, I did not have these kinds of metrics because sometimes we do not look into these kinds of metrics as technical persons, as developers, right? I had to reach out to a few other people and understand the why behind it and do that. This level of information would be required for you to actually raise the bar during a behavioral interview. Cool. Now, you can either stop there and I'll keep on adding more data to the result. You can say it at that time, or you can always have them for the follow-up questions. Like if there is a follow-up question, what difficulty did you face? So, or what were the learnings you had? So you can always say that it took us more time than anticipated, but we learned a lot along the way. Based on the learnings, I created a blueprint, best practices, documented SOP for other teams to migrate, and that shows your scale, right? And then you can say using these documents, different teams have migrated for 24 more applications so far. So that has shown actually how this migrations not only be successful, but also become as a blueprint for other migrations at the company to be carried out. And then you can also talk about your personal growth. The project deepened my expertise in large-scale cloud migrations and gave me an opportunity to work with multiple stakeholders and cross-functional teams. Just an example where it can show you multiple facets where the results can be, right? I've seen some people saying that result was I got promoted. That is not a result. That's a byproduct. You do good work and you get promotion. You do good work, you get recognition from your manager. The result is the actual impact that has happened for the customer. Okay. There's a question. Can we get the time to prepare the answer and come back with the answer? Or if we have the data ready, can we provide the answer but no answer for follow-up questions? I'm trying to understand the question, so I'll read it again. Can we get the time to prepare the answer? Okay, so you're saying during the interview while it is happening, you can always take a minute or two, 30 seconds or a minute. Do not go for a very long pause. But up to 30 seconds or up to even a minute is okay if you want to collect your thoughts and then respond to it. But if the question is that do you get time to prepare for interview? Yes, you can ask as much time as you would like. I took 6 weeks before my loop interview. After I cleared my phone screen, I took 6 weeks to prepare for my loop interview. And that's where you can take as much time as you would like. I would generally say people to take at least 2 to 3 weeks, at least bare minimum, because at least for AWS interview, the preparation is going to set you up for success. These interviews are not like you can just simply go and talk about your experience. These require you to reflect on your experiences, jot down all the points, practice this multiple times, practice in front of the mirror, record them, listen back, see improve, do a mock interview with a friend, do everything possible, and that would take time. And it's not like just 1 or 2 interviews. It's AWS Loop is 5 interviews, and so is all, like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all these big companies, they are going to take multiple rounds. So it takes time to prepare. Now, the second part to the question is, if we have the data ready, can we provide the answer but no answers for follow-up questions? Okay. Now, this is where I would say you need to play smart. Now, if you're going to, let's say as an interviewer, I asked a question. And if the interviewee is going to keep on going for a monologue for 5 to 10 minutes, I would lose track. It will be very difficult for me to follow, right? So think about it as a normal conversation happening between 2 people, right? So if there are 2 people who are talking, and if one of the person asks you a question, forget about interview setting, in any general setting, right? You would ensure that you say a few things, give the other person opportunity to ask few questions, and make it more of a dialogue rather than making the monologue. Cool. So how many stories do you suggest we need to practice to ready? Good question again. For AWS interview, I suggest minimum 8. You can go up to 15, but I always say quality over quantity. Have strong 8 to 10 stories than thinking about having 12 to 15 weak stories. But that is something that you would actually need. Around 8 stories is the bare minimum I would say you will need for covering the 5 rounds. Also depends upon the level you're interviewing for. If it is a L4 level, which is associate level, probably you can go with 6 to 8. But if it is anything above L5, you will need around 8 to 12 easily. Okay. Now moving forward, I know we are almost on time. Very quickly, what I'll do is that this is the checklist that is there, and you will get the PPT in which when you're writing your story, ensure that these things are covered, and covered in a precise and a concise manner, in a way that it leaves enough hints for the interviewer to ask you questions to dive deep on. So the situation, like I said, where you're working, what your role was, when did the event occur, and any relevant data metrics to showcase the importance of the situation. For task, what you need to accomplish, what are the goals, and what is the urgency or the importance of the task. In action, ensure that you use the I statements, be specific about what you did. Explain your thought process and decision making, and highlight any skills. And result, as we discussed, be specific about what was achieved, quantifiable metrics as much as possible. Positive impact on the company, team, and the project. So here we talked about not only just one migration, but that served as a blueprint for multiple other migrations, and lessons learned for yourself. What I'll also do is quickly, I'll show this example, and I've created one worksheet, and I'll send you the link so that you can download it. And here, what you see in the first column is the different kinds of behavioral questions category, like customer user focus story, success story, failure stories, conflict story, problem solving skills. There are different kinds of behavioral stories. And I provided a few blogs here at the end, which will help you understand these things. And for each of these stories, what I've done is that I've given a question bank. So if you have been following my newsletter, I did provide this questioning before, but I've consolidated them in this particular worksheet so that if for these questions categories, you have these questions also. And I provide the description for each of these different kinds of stories, like, customer success story, what you need to show. For success story, what you need to show. So I provide a description. And then here, this is where you can jot down your experiences, and then split that into situation, task, action, result format, and any specific data that you might be having for your follow-up questions. So kind of a worksheet that will help you create your own data, like story bank. And you might be having multiple stories for customer success or success story or failure stories. Just duplicate the row, and I've provided the instructions here. Duplicate the row and have more examples. In the first row, I provide an example, and this example was given by someone who has cleared a solutions architect role at AWS, right? And this is the exact answer that they have provided. We can go through it very quickly. Like situation, last year when I was working for an insurance company as a AWS cloud engineer consultant through Accenture, I discovered that they were spending too much money on VPC interface endpoints without sharing between the VPCs, between all the VPCs. So it's a question that, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond customer expectation. And in the situation, the candidate has shown that when they're working with one of the insurance customer as a consultant from Accenture, they saw that the customer is spending too much money because of VPC endpoints. So they identified and highlighted the issue to the client. And then they said that they will find a solution to reduce the cost by using a better configuration for VPC and interface endpoints and ensuring there will be no disruption to services. In the action, very briefly, they talked about the whole cost optimization project that the person has led and how he has worked with different teams. And in the result, they talked about the change resulted in monthly savings of up to 7,000 euros for the customer just by sharing the VPC interface endpoints. And then also talks about earning trust from the customer, obviously because customer did not even know that such a problem existed. So it shows your proactiveness, bias for action as we call it, and the ownership. And then you earned trust from the customer, and it also talks about it enhanced the person's capability or expertise in network and DNS challenges. And in this blog, this is released now, so I'm going to update this, in which I've listed all the different kinds of follow-up questions that can be asked and you need to be prepared for. So let me do one thing. Let me send a link through which you'll be able to download this worksheet. And by downloading this worksheet, you will also be signed up for one of the, a campaign for one of the course that I'm delivering in December. It's a paid behavioral or a big tech interview course. And let me send the link of that course also if anyone is interested in joining. So you'll be able to get all the free resources through the newsletter, but in the workshop, it will be a small cohort based, and we all will be working together to fill these stories for every person. So you'll be able to actually have hands-on experience doing that. And this is the workshop. Cool. So that's all on the star format. I know we are almost on time now. So any more questions? How we can quantify? Let me stop sharing and let me look into the questions. How can we quantify the metrics? So yeah, it depends upon exactly. You need to talk about what metrics. You first of all think about what metrics you are thinking, and then you need to be able to defend it. So for example, we made the migration 30% faster. Faster by what? What is it? The industry standard, previous migration. You need to ensure that you're able to answer any follow-up questions for that. The next question is, any tips on the interview story of a person who is new to IT cloud jobs? Yes, there are many. Unfortunately, we do not have time, but in next couple of newsletters, I'll be sharing few of the stories which would be for someone who has transitioned from a non-technical world to cloud. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Ifyani, right? So Ifyani joined as a guest speaker, and he has joined AWS now as TAM. So in his interview, he provided all his experiences of being an, no, not all of them, but few of them as being an athlete and all. Some experiences obviously he has as working as an IT cloud support engineer and others, a cloud engineer and others. But few of the examples that he has provided are from his athletic backgrounds and other kinds of works that he has done. So it's very much possible. I know a lot of people who have done that. Like Parna, for example, if she would have been here, I would have asked her to give her example that how she actually, being for 12 years not in the IT world, has been able to transition and come into IT, and what kind of examples she has provided. Is the course only for solutions architect or product managers? Okay, so when the course is neither for solution architect nor for product managers, it is for all of them. Irrespective of which technical background or technical specific specialty you have, it does not matter much. If you look into the course details, it says that it is mainly to help you answer your behavioral questions. So it will help you to showcase your experience in a way that you're able to communicate it to the interviewer. Whether it is technical, whether it is a product management, it is not a course to help you with algorithm, DSA, or system design, or the technical stuff like Linux or cloud. The course is mainly that you got the technical skills, you got your core skills in your respective domain. How do you actually articulate that and present yourself so that you can get a job at FAANG companies?
Thank you, Prasad. Interesting discussion. And yeah, I like the checklist, and that example is really useful. So hopefully people would make most out of it. And it's not like there was a question like, is this interview, is that a specific label you have of star interviews in AWS? I would say every interview is star interview. So this is not specific to a role, or it could be a role of an executive assistant. It could be a role of receptionist. But the mentality or the philosophy of why we are asking question and what we want to get out of it remains the same. So star is not just for solution architect or for a technical or non-technical role. It applies to anything in most big companies. So that's not at all a problem. Right.
Yes, and that's true. STAR is a methodology, not for a specific role.
Exactly.
It's philosophy, as Ashish mentioned.
And
yeah, Sharik has a lot of experience with STAR, right? And he used to
Sharik is a star interviewer. He has interviewed like how many people? 300 plus, I guess.
300 is official on the portal. I think 250-ish. But if I talk about others, it's like, I don't know, maybe 700-800. I just wanted to add, I actually took a few notes when Prasad was talking, and there was one question, I think from Siddesh, he was talking about this, you have the experience, and this I get a lot. So I want to kind of, tackle that question, that you have experience in other domains and you are kind of transitioning into cloud or related domains. One of the things I recommend everybody, that make sure, even though you don't have, let's say, practical exposure on cloud, there is no problem. Nobody's stopping you from getting exposure, as Prasad mentioned, side projects. Have some projects which you can show, create a website, put some basic stuff over there and see how it is working, because things like scalability, availability, fault tolerance, or maybe the architecture, the caching, these things are very easy to build. And when you have those kind of things, you can when you showcase something, they say picture is worth 1,000 words. So here a project is worth 1,000 interviews, that kind of thing. And make sure everybody, you should have some sort of GitHub profile. This has happened with me as well. When I take interviews, a lot of times I have candidates who don't have practical exposure, but they have done their side projects. They mentioned, okay, this is what I have on GitHub. I will go ahead and let's say open the page, and there is a Terraform template or a CloudFormation template, and they start taking me through that. That is a very, very positive thing for somebody. Then at the moment you start talking about Terraform or CloudFormation or something similar, it doesn't matter if you have exposure or not, as long as you know the subject matter. Right. So having a GitHub profile, having a project which you can showcase, these are some of the things how you can highlight, and you can kind of overcome the problem that you don't have an actual exposure on cloud computing. Just one small thing to mention. And there was one last thing, which was about I think Shruti asked a question about like if you're new to something. So see, if you're very new in terms of as a person, you are a college pass out, like recently you're passed out, I would say obviously we won't ask you questions such as like what customer situation, that customer situation, but leadership principles such as learn and be curious, deep dive, those would be the most crucial factor. I mean, if you're a fresher, what I'm looking at, you have the fundamental knowledge and you are ready to learn. You have a positive attitude, right? Sorry for that. So that's what you will what we will look into, right? So yes, don't doubt your capability. Have a positive attitude. That's the most important thing. What a lot of times what we see, people who are very experienced, they know stuff, but there is this something is holding them back, and there's a negative attitude towards it. On the other side, if I'm talking to Prasad, he's a human being. He's not an alien, right? And he has the same sort of capabilities and things. Obviously he's senior to me, he is taking my interview, but he's a human being. Think of the other person as human being. Have a discussion, try to convert that into a discussion. I think at some point Prasad mentioned it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. So very important, very, very important, and very powerful. That helps you a lot.
And Sharif, you said the very right thing. And this happened with me before I joined AWS. I used to think, and to everyone who doubt themselves, I'll tell you my story about how I doubted myself. I passed out in 2007, interviewed with Microsoft, got rejected. Interviewed with Adobe, got rejected. Interviewed a few other companies, got rejected. I'm like, okay, I'm not cut for tier 1 companies. I'm not a top tier company person. I interviewed with smaller companies and I got through. I'm like, I'm happy with my tier 2, tier 3 company. And I worked for almost more than 10 years in those companies, even ever thinking about I'll apply to these big companies at all. Right? I've seen a couple of my friends joining Amazon and getting 10x of my salary. I'm like, okay, they are smarter than me. I am not that smart. I'm not going to apply for this. It happened by chance that I was in London. I was looking for, to change my role. And one of my seniors said that, Prasad, let me get you referred to Amazon. I'm like, please do not joke. I'll not be able to. I'm real need of, job. So let me try and apply to companies that I'll be able to clear rather than, aspiring too much. Right. That was a statement, So, and irrespective, anyways, you're interviewing with so many companies. Why not, what will be the worst? Your resume will not get shortlisted. You will not clear the interview. The resume got shortlisted. I cleared the first round. I cleared the second round. And they called me for loop interview. And that's when I thought, oh, this is getting serious. Now I have a real shot of working with a top tier company. And that's when actually I took those 6 weeks and prepared well. And then I realized that I was, fearing, it was the only thing missing was 2 things. One is self-confidence. Second is preparation. So don't doubt on yourself. Anyone who is here listening to this, they think that whether they belong to FAANG or not, you definitely belong to. There is nothing special in me, Sharik, or Ashish. If you have met me in 2018, you would have, I would laugh, but almost laughed at me, right? But now if you see me, there is obviously I have a long way to go in terms of growth, but still now I have kind of got the confidence a bit. And this is what, all of us have that skills and capabilities. It's just about having, remove the self-doubt, and preparation is the key. You will not be able to clear without the preparation. I was talking to one person who has cleared, one of the BESA member who has cleared AWS interview very recently, and we'll talk about that person very soon when he, all the formalities gets over. I've seen the preparation that the person has done. You won't believe. He has done 2x preparation of what I have done at that time. I've seen the full story bank the person has created with all the color coding and everything. I'm like, wow, how many hours the person would have invested, right? And now, that gets the results. So first is obviously think that you'll be able to do it. And second, obviously there is no escape to hard work. The preparation has to be done.
Right. No, that actually, you actually already answered that question, but I think somebody asked about, how should I prepare? How many stories I have? And I always tell this thing, sit down on a piece of paper, write down, or digital format, type it down, whatever you want to do, but make sure you have 8 to 10 stories. Go back and look back at your career, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, doesn't matter. Just make sure you highlight, like, you multiply that by number of years. If you have 10 years of experience, you should have at least 20 stories, right? Every year, you should have worked on at least one or two meaningful things which you can highlight and talk. And when you have those things written on a piece of paper or somewhere in a notebook, you practice, there are 2-3 very important things which happen. One thing is that you are able to then understand what kind of follow-up questions you might be getting on that when you read that, once you have written that thing. The second thing is, when you have these stories, once you have played this in your mind, it gives you a more coherent answer when you're talking, because interviews are very time box thing, right? And if you have not prepared, your answers will be gibberish, incoherent, and and just after the interview, you realize, oh, I should have said that. I should have said that. I missed that part. That would not happen if you have done this preparation and you have this structure in your head. That's very important, because we all have stories. We all have done things which we are proud of. We have all done things which we are not so proud of, right? So we have lots of stories. We are all human beings again. It's just that how ready you are.
Yeah. And sharing not so proud of stories also very important. You need to show that what you have, how you failed and what you learned from him.
I tell this, to people, anybody who is more than 5 years of experience, make sure that you have at least 2-3 negative stories, because once you have worked for 5 years, you cannot say that you have not done a mistake in your life or in your professional career. You cannot say that.
It only means 2 things. I always say this: if you don't have a failure story, and I have rejected many candidates at AWS, almost every interviewer rejects when they say that, I don't fail, because it means only 2 things. One, either you are lying, because if you're in IT, you would fail. You would have missed a deadline. You would have, bring the production down at some point or something like that.
So I have done
either you are lying, or second, you never left your comfort zone. Exactly. You've always been in your comfort zone. And if you have always been in a comfort zone, means that you're not looking for growth, or you don't have a growth mindset.
You're not trying enough. As simple as that.
Exactly. You're not trying enough. You're not trying enough. You have more potential, but you're sitting on it. So, okay.
Great discussion, guys. It can go on for hours and hours. So I have to step in and let's let's box it in, because people have their timing.
Right. Just one idea, Prasad. Probably this can be one of the behavioral tracks we can talk about. Maybe we can have this dedicated session where we talk about our failure stories and how to tell this in a positive way during interview. This could be an interesting discussion.
Could be an interesting.
Let's do it next week, Sharik. I have multiple failure stories, and I'm sure you have multiple failure stories. So, and then,
right.
Yeah, let's. So that's a good topic for next week. So yeah, let's box it in. Let's box it in. Good. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for bearing with us for a little extended time. But I hope that people are making most of these sessions. And these sessions are tailored for you based on the feedback you provide. So feedback is important. Whatever we are doing, we don't want to do it in isolation. What works for you? What doesn't work? What could be improved? Let us know. And if you are enjoying this session, let your friends know, let your family know, so that everyone gets benefited out of it, right? So any appreciation, any shout out on the LinkedIn or any social media would be highly appreciated. And we hope to see you into next week, and we'll be discussing more interesting stuff. All these things which we talked about, we will be sending in an email. So most of you are getting it. In case some of you are not getting it, reach out to me, Prasad, or anyone, and we should be able to add you into the distribution list. But this is important so that you keep resources, and don't just keep it, use it, improve yourself, and let us know also that how we could improve ourselves also. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.